All right. Welcome to another LinkedIn Live session brought to you by Optiv, the cyber advisory and solutions leader. I'm Curtis Fechner. I'm an engineering fellow here at Optiv, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. So, first of all, thank you all for joining. We host these sessions on LinkedIn because we want to hear from you in real time. We want to have some actual interaction with folks live. Don't hesitate to drop any questions or thoughts in comments into the comment section here. We're going to do our best to answer them live during the Q&A at the end of this. Can't promise to get to them all, but we're certainly going to try. Today, we're going to be discussing Optiv's 2024 Threat and Risk Management Report. So we put this together along with the Ponemon Institute. Optiv surveyed 650 IT and cybersecurity professionals on their prioritized and risk management activities, looking at technology, budget, and governance. Joining me today here to discuss the survey are Dr. Larry Ponemon and Pradeep Sakar. Dr. Ponemon is the chairman and founder of the Ponemon Institute and is considered a pioneer in privacy auditing and the Responsible Information Management, or RIM framework. And Pradeep Sakar is a seasoned cybersecurity leader and director within Optiv's cyber strategy and risk team, who has worked closely with Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 CISOs to develop and sustain secure, adaptive cybersecurity programs. So, intros out of the way, let's go ahead and get going. So, this is straight hot off the press as it just launched this morning. So this report has really yielded some interesting and surprising results for us. So first, Larry, if you can start by giving us some insight into how this survey was conducted, who was polled, and how this was distributed to your targeted group of professionals.
Absolutely. Well, first, I want to thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you and your team. I think we working together have a lot of synergy, and hopefully we get to do this again with Optiv. So
I hope so.
My name is Larry Ponemon, not Larry Pokemon, but whatever. And I am the founder of the Ponemon Institute. And we've been in existence now for 24 years, maybe even more than that. I don't want to tell you, maybe more like 25 years. But we really love working on projects specifically focused on cybersecurity risk and so on. So the title of our study, 2024 Cybersecurity Threat and Risk Management Survey. It's a pretty impressive title. Hopefully the results are as impressive. So with that being said, let me tell you a little bit about our study. As you mentioned already, Curtis, our sampling frame was very large, 650 qualified respondents. When we do a study, what we try to do is identify the people who are most likely to have knowledge so that we would be able to fairly answer questions. Occasionally we get some weird results where someone has like a high school education and and they're a track star and they want to become a cybersecurity person. It doesn't work too well, but it does happen from time to time. But with a very large sample, we screen several times to get a result of a sample of learned individuals. And that's what we have here. People who are involved in IT and IT security and many other areas like cyber governance and so on are all included in our sampling frame. And each year, that sampling frame tends to grow. This year, we have a qualified sample of 650, as I mentioned before, and we expect that number to continue to grow. It's one of the competitive advantages of a lean and mean company like Ponemon Institute is the ability to develop sampling frames and data resources for studies just like this one. So I think with that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Curtis.
I appreciate it. Yeah, and I really appreciate the overall scope of the sample set. It makes the data that much more revelatory and interesting. So looking at the results, perhaps the first most notable stat is the rise in data breaches that were reported. I believe that 61% of the respondents said that cyber incidents have increased in the past 12 months. And that's in addition to that, we also have 29% of our respondents actually indicate a significant increase. So Pradeep, what can we make of the sharp rise?
Yeah, thanks, Curtis. Yes, we have seen a significant increase in cyber incidents in the past 12 months, right? And we are seeing, I would say, three factors pretty much driving it. First, there has been increased sophistication of these cyber attacks, primarily with attackers using advanced threat techniques with the advent of AI and ML to evade detection. The second one being the rise of ransomware as a service platforms. Now, what has that done is it's made it easier for even to launch sophisticated ransomware attacks. And third, we are also seeing an increased reliance from organizations on third-party vendors and third-party software that is also introducing additional vulnerabilities within their respective supply chains. Right? Take, for example, the Progress Software's Move It vulnerability in 2023. Right? So even organizations who did not use the Move It software were impacted because their vendors and partners downstream were using it, and by virtue of which even their data was getting compromised. And in the last year, we've also had several of our clients reach out to us asking us to support them with various services that pretty much alludes to the trends we've been seeing, right? So we've seen increased asks around ransomware readiness assessments, supply chain security assessments of their entire supply chain, as well as attack surface management related engagements as well, right? So yeah, that's been something that we've seen, and that's something that correlates well with what you're seeing in the report as well. Yeah, back to you, Curtis.
Nice, thanks. Yeah. It's great to hear you call out the ransomware thing. I think it's obvious, but at the same time, it's really remarkable just how much of a continuous driver it has been for the kind of the state of the cybersecurity industry and just what everybody's kind of experiencing collectively here. I suppose, like I said on our last LinkedIn Live that I was a participant in, if I'm in the ransomware game, it's pretty lucrative, and we all know that money is a pretty good motivator. So I suppose that, cynically speaking, I wasn't that shocked that we saw an uptick, and just in some cases a very significant uptick among our respondents. Larry, any additional commentary from you on this bit of feedback that we got?
Yeah, it's a very complex issue. When we look at organizations that report having an increase in the number of cyber attacks, and then they find out after they do a kind of a deep analysis that maybe the number was actually worse. So it wasn't that they were getting better; it was they had tools that were getting better, and as a result, they're able to identify things that they should have identified last year or the last decade. But we don't. Sometimes we see the responses. Well, maybe we're not generating real value from our technologies that we're investing in. That's the wrong conclusion. It's usually that you need to have those technologies to identify. And so we're starting to see kind of a general pattern where companies are getting smarter on this whole issue, which is good news.
So actually, and this provokes an interesting question that came in on the from the LinkedIn audience here that I think is worth bringing up now is when we think about our respondents and our respondents to this kind of a question, how have you tackled the response bias potential from the respondents when they're answering like subjective questions like how bad breaches are?
Right. So we've been doing surveys for a long time and using other methods like interviews and so on. And the reality is that you can never totally get rid of bias in surveys. You just can't. You could get real close to zero probably nearly perfect reliability, but normally there will be one or two people in your sample that are just weird. You see some of those patterns, like if you have a response and you do not unsure or can't determine or whatever it is, these are the people that just check the box quickly. And we try to look at patterns to get rid of people who are obviously marginal or don't have the right background. Occasionally we go too far too. Like occasionally I get a message from my cell phone saying, "What do you mean my response was ridiculous?" So we have to kind of appease some people to make sure that we properly record the bias. But the bias exists, and we do take steps to minimize it, but it's never perfect.
Sure, I appreciate that. So moving on to another area that's going to be of interest to a lot of folks who have some sort of a financial level of control here. When it comes to budgets, 59% of our respondents actually said that their cyber budgets had increased, and 46% of them saw budgets that increased over 25%, which is great. The top ranked budget priorities among these folks were internal security process investments and governance assessments. Also some IAM resources, so identity management and cybersecurity tool purchases. So it's a little bit spread out. Preet, what do you make of this though?
Yeah, I would say this kind of correlates directly with the increasing number of cyber attacks that we're seeing in the marketplace, right? So the increase in cyber incidents, as well as what our companies, as well as the reputational damage that companies, as well as executive leadership face, this has put cybersecurity near the top of every board's agenda in most of the organizations. Also, what we're seeing is increased focus on complying with regulations such as GDPR, CCRA, and scrutiny from regulators such as the Securities and Exchange Commission, we see budget allocations being leveraged to focus on security assessments as well as evaluating how robust your security programs are. In fact, like you called out in the report this year, we have seen that around 51% said that the most important cyber governance activity is actually conducting an internal or external audit of the security and IT compliance practices. So, and as companies mature, right, we're also seeing them starting to leverage an approach wherein they enhance cyber governance while also increasing their security tool purchases so they can better defend themselves against external threats manifesting in the environment.
Nice. Yeah, it's interesting. So I work in Optiv's threat management practice, which is, one of your siblings here. And so we're all about incident response is kind of the big one, threat intelligence, vulnerability management, and then of course can't leave out the our friends that do the offensive security testing. Hi guys, if you're watching. But yeah, no, we've definitely noticed some interesting trends as well with this. So for quite a few years, we saw a lot of investment into expanding visibility into workstation server endpoints, adopting things like EDR technology, things like that, things that are almost required now for insurance and insurability requirements. But we've still seen that kind of continuous overall interest in incident readiness, being ready for an attack. A lot of interest in simple activities like tabletop exercises, actually. It's remarkable how seriously people are taking these days versus maybe 10 years ago when I was much earlier in my career, and people were doing them, but it was very checkbox. And now people are a lot more involved and a lot more committed to seeing these exercises through. So that's been great to see that overall desire grow. So another key area of focus, whether we're talking budget, staffing, governance practice, or practice keeping up, or with the worsening threat landscape, really, in the survey, we found that 51% plan to purchase more cybersecurity tools, 51% of our respondents, and 40% said that they had too many tools to maintain a strong security posture. And interestingly, only about 29% said that they felt that they had the right number of tools. So the question becomes, how do we understand this disconnect between organizations thinking that more tools are needed to solve problems, and yet we have others who feel that they have too many tools to respond to threats quickly and effectively?
Yeah, so this dichotomy of needing more tools and also having more tools to manage is continuing. And in this year's report, we see that almost 51% they express a desire to go purchase more security tools, while at the same time, each organization on average, what we found from this year's report, they have 54 separate security tools, right, that they need to manage and maintain every single year. Now, security leaders across organizations, they're focusing on countering the expanding threat landscape by leveraging these multiple point solutions. That is also ending up increasing the technologies that they need to internally manage within their programs. So we're seeing clients increasingly reaching out to our to Optiv to help with performing technology rationalization engagements, to support them with identifying what are the necessary technologies that I need to have based on the different internal use cases, right? And to rationalize and consolidate them. In effect, also maintaining their overall security posture. One other thing that did come up from this year's report is we identified the top technology tools that clients are using from our surveys is pretty much in the foundational security space, right? So they are leveraging next generation firewalls, IDS, IPS solutions. We are seeing antivirus and anti-malware solutions, cloud and container security solutions, as well as EDR tools being increasingly deployed across the majority of organizations that we survey.
Nice, thank you. Yeah. I know that I have a narrower view of this area simply because I'm working with clients typically in a much more like midstream in an incident or something like that. So when we start talking about tools, most of the time it's like, these are the immediate tools that I'm dealing with to solve for the incident. I know when I talk to people who work in more of like a doing things security operations role, the folks that are kind of on the ground level, there's a lot more of a desire to have consolidated tool stacks that are more complementary and easy to work within so they can kind of manage their workflow. Say they're working an incident or an investigation collaboratively with other people. Losing track of the kind of the chain of the events and evidence is a really common problem, especially when an incident becomes broad spectrum. So something that I've certainly found is that the folks that are kind of doing that investigative work genuinely benefit from working within consistent sort of panes of glass and being able to keep track of all of their information in one place. But I still see some odd trends now and then. Maybe you've seen this too, right? Like sometimes you'll see that the security team has no insight into an organization's like Microsoft 365 environment or something like that, because that's being handled by the IT or a cloud team. And then DLP is being managed by a team tied to legal and not security, something like that. So sometimes you have these kind of odd organizational interfaces too. So I'm going to move on though. The crux of the report here really in terms of what it means for security teams to find to be the most valuable activities. So we saw within our report, we saw that the top 5 ranked threat and risk management activities included, the top one was vulnerability management, 57%, adaptive perimeter controls, so 53% there, threat intelligence at 51%. That definitely tracks with some things that I've observed in conversations. Capability maturity modeling and reporting, good old maturity assessments. And then, of course, endpoint and mobile device management is still an absolutely critical concern as well. But what do you make of this, Pradeep?
Yeah, so this year we are seeing significant investments being made by organizations in their threat and risk management space, right? And some of the key areas that we have observed where these investments are going in is with respect to AI being the buzzword, is managing risks related to building and using AI models within organizations, right? Now, Optiv has our point of view on how we can help support clients manage risks within their AI and ML building process, if you would. But in addition to that, we're also seeing an increased focus on how do I identify and remediate in a timely manner of the various vulnerabilities that I've been identifying. The other one we are also seeing is from a regulatory space, right? And new standards that's coming up. So the publication of version 2 of the NIST cybersecurity framework, we're seeing organizations are evaluating their current security posture, not only in terms of the controls, but they're also focusing on capability maturity. How do I enhance the overall security program maturity for my organization? And another shout out to the SEC's latest rules on disclosure of material cybersecurity incidents that is shining the spotlight on how it is important and crucial to report to the board and making them aware of the robustness of the company's security control. So all of this is pretty much helping drive towards where the investments are being made within organizations.
Yeah. I had kind of mentioned really quickly that I had especially seen a lot of interest in the threat intelligence side of things. And so it was almost like confirming my own biases, my own assumptions to see that like over half of them ranked threat intelligence in their top 5 for things that they found to be valuable activities. I think that there's an increasing realization that I've picked up on, at least, that a lot of our clients and just people who work in security really are trying to do better to understand how the various types of bad guys work, because different groups work in different ways and represent different kinds of risks to an organization. And so there's more of this realization, I think, that I've observed, at least, that people are trying to get a better grasp around what's actually happening and what those realistic threats really look like and how they work, because that informs those overall security strategies a lot better. So one thing, I'm actually going to kind of move back to discussing the survey itself here. And as I mentioned, threat intelligence. So one of the bigger things when I talk about threat intelligence a lot, something that intelligence professionals recognize a lot is bias, which Larry has already talked to us about. But going beyond that with the survey, with all these detailed findings, I have to imagine that it's extremely important that we discuss how the questions are posed in these surveys. So one thing, kind of going back almost on the topic of bias, but not just that, but more from the methodology of the survey itself. Larry, can you help us understand maybe a little bit more about what's important in framing a good survey question and how that wording might actually impact the results that we're going to get in this feedback?
Sure. I mean, clearly, an ideal world, the actual statement or question itself basically is equivalent to the actual belief or perception of the individual taking the survey. And so the idea is that if you have a infinite amount of time, you probably create a model that gives you still very good accuracy and even reliability, not to perfection still, but clearly, asymptotically, it gets you pretty close to zero. The problem is that a lot of questions change because there are intervening variables. That basically today your response to a beautiful day, sun shining, you live on a lake, you want to go tubing, whatever, and you get just happy. You do the Ponemon survey and you say, I believe I'm going to choose items A, B, C, whatever it is. Same question, but on a miserable day, it's snowing in the middle of summer up in northern Michigan. You're angry because you want to go out on the lake. Basically, you get a result that is completely different in some cases. So there are those intervening variables, interactions, and so on that create difficulty in having a perfect survey. But that's why you need to do complete testing. Testing to make sure it's correct and it doesn't have any artifacts that could lead the respondent down the wrong path. It's kind of funny because, just as an aside, more than 10 years ago, I was asked to present to the Securities and Exchange Commission a model for determining materiality. And when I presented it, the person who headed up the SEC at the time basically said, this is of no value to us. And now they're saying this is the most important thing that they could ever touch in the realm of security. So it's just I had to bring up that point. They're probably going to now sue me or have to change my financial reports because I've angered the guys at the SEC. But that basically is that really happened.
So now I'm curious, almost an elephant in the room question whenever we're talking about the M word, materiality.
Oh.
How did you actually, Dr. Ponemon, how did you define that term to them? How did you define materiality when you were presenting it?
Great question. In the accounting world, and it's definitely the SEC, materiality is defined using a probabilistic model. It's based on the financial accounting standards, FASB number 5, which has been around for ages, is accounting for contingencies. And that particular requirement, which has again existed for many, many years, is the starting point to materiality. The materiality in financial world would normally apply to the cost impact or the revenue loss impact of a specific event. So you have a breach and the boards of director members say, we're not going to let the world know. We'll just have to report a number that's really low so that they don't see it as material. Big problem, does exist today in many organizations. They get into trouble for that. But materiality is really about the how significant is a given issue, and probabilistically, what's the likelihood that that's going to happen to my organization? If it's already happened, it's trying to understand the cost impact of that event. If you're interested in seeing it, whoever asked the question, it's not in this paper, but I could send a copy of an earlier paper we did. It's now getting old. It's almost 8 or 9 years old, but we still think it's pretty cool.
No, I appreciate that. It almost sounds like we have a little bit of a loss in translation between sort of the information security world and parts of it, at least, and the folks who have that familiarity with the accounting terminology and things like that. And I think there's almost been a little bit of loss in translation where you get people like me who are pure security people. We don't deal with accounting and things like that. And so we don't think of materiality probably in the same way that you would have this professional definition of it. I appreciate that clarification a lot. And I suspect that probably hit for a few other people that were watching as well. So some other questions here while we have a little bit of time left here that I wanted to get to is, well, we'd be a little bit remiss without commenting on AI enthusiasm, and I know we've got some questions as well in the from the audience here that are really good on this one. So is it as much of a fad in the security industry as it is in popular culture? Our survey respondents said something like 44% of our respondents use AI or machine learning to prevent cyber attacks. What do we think about some of the results that we saw in terms of AI?
Pradeep, or I could.
Larry, if you want to take it away to start, and then Pradeep, feel free to back clean up.
So again, this is one of those things where words have real meaning. A lot of people say, yeah, we're using AI. What does AI stand for? Or machine learning, what is ML? The reality is that a lot of organizations are starting to look very seriously at AI and ML, machine learning applications. But the question is, I think a lot of the folks that are doing the early adopters are realizing that what they have is not workable or basically provides a low level of value in the short run because they don't necessarily know how to integrate the tools and with other applications and platforms. We're seeing a lot of that right now. So there's kind of I predict over the next year or so a decline in the use of AI in some cases for cybersecurity. And then there will be a fix to the problem, and there will be enormous value to having AI done correctly. So that's our prediction. We're trying to survey that. We're getting interesting results, which would be pleased to share with the audience.
Yeah, yeah, and right on point as well, right? So because what we're also seeing is, and from the report, we've also seen with respect to what our survey respondents have said in terms of where they're using AI ML based techniques, and predominantly it seems to be AI enabled, let's say vulnerability scanning, AI enabled firewall. So we've seen responses from our respondents in similar vein. But one of the things like Larry did mention is it's currently in the testing phase, right? So organizations, security teams are trying out different proof of concepts. At the end of the day, it's going to be a test for productivity. If it enhances productivity of teams, if it enables teams to be more efficient, given staff shortages and security talent shortages across the industry, across individual organizations, if this really works out, which we would get to know within the next 1.5 years, this would be a game changer for teams and organizations to be really able to be more efficient in what they do with the existing staff and the budgets that they do have.
Awesome. Yeah, I certainly have my opinions on the AI thing. I'm one of those people who usually gets I'll kind of shake my fist at the internet when I hear it used as a singular term for describing a lot of different technologies that do different things, which I suppose is a little snarky. But yeah, no, we definitely see a lot of interest, like at the operator level. There seems to be a lot of interest from organizations in any kind of tools that can make their security analysts just a little more accurate or a little more productive, just to kind of give them some crutches to make sure that they're being thorough with an investigation or something like that. We talk about machine learning. I mean, obviously, we've seen that in security controls for over a decade now, really. So that part's not quite as novel, but it is interesting that we've continued to see a progression where a lot of security engineering and like detection technologies and things like that start to feel almost more like big data analytics and less like the more traditional methodologies, like I'll use malware detection, right? Picking through individual malware samples, doing reverse engineering and writing code signatures and things like that. If I can turn that into a bigger at scale data analytics problem and solve that by putting horsepower in the cloud, it certainly looks a lot cheaper. So I can see the appreciation for it. The big question that continues to be asked that I end up in discussions in is probably a similar one to what you've seen, Pradeep, which is where is the data going and what is being fed into learning models or anything else on the back end that I have no control over? And that seems to be kind of the lingering question that's giving people a little bit of a pause at times as far as adoption.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen something similar.
Yeah, it's been that's been some of the questions that's being asked, right? And at Optiv, we look at AI, I would say, in one of three ways, right? So we're looking at it from how organizations are using to build their own models within businesses, which we're calling as the enterprise AI. We also look at how employees are using it, publicly available AI models, which is what we look at risks pertaining to the use of public AI. And finally, product AI, right? So with each of these products coming in, which have their own AI-enabled features in there, are we really looking at, really having hold on what risks that they are bringing in addition to having those models in place?
Awesome. Yeah. So I think we're getting to the bottom of the hour here, so we should probably close this out for folks so they can get back to work or whatever else they're doing. So wanted to maybe share some final thoughts from each of us about what we thought were the most interesting or surprising results from the survey. I'm actually going to start, and I'm going to pick something that wasn't a result directly, but it was something that I thought was really interesting with the survey. So I actually really like to skip to the end sometimes, especially on Ponemon surveys, and read through the methodology information because I always find it revelatory to understand who participated. And so something that stuck out to me was that 21% of the respondents indicated they had a normal staff or a technical role. So to me, my interpretation is these are the people who are kind of down on the ground level working in the field on security problems day in and day out. And so, yeah, we've got talking heads like us who can speak about this at a high level on a daily basis. But seeing that these kinds of people who do this work and are hands-on, getting their hands dirty, to me says that this data is very valuable, and it really gives us a lot of perspectives beyond just the people who are at the top of the security hierarchy. Pradeep, what was your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, one thing that stood out for me was we usually talk about identifying how many clients and organizations have cybersecurity insurance in place, right? So they bought cybersecurity insurance plans, paying premiums. But one thing that usually gets missed out is the difficulty to purchase those security insurances. And that's something that was, I would say, highlighted. We had this particular report wherein 52% of respondents, they said it was becoming difficult to purchase security insurance plans, and primarily because of insurers having requirements around needing to have certain policies and technologies in place, needing to have a proper security scanning vulnerability program, as well as having multi-factor authentication in place. So that is when they become eligible to even go ahead and buy that security insurance plan. So that's something that really stood out for me when I went through.
Nice. And Dr. Ponemon, how about yourself? Did anything stand out as remarkable to you?
Well, first, the two comments that you made, each of you, I should say. So I agree with you completely. It was a ditto response. But in addition, what really was very interesting is if you look at like CSIRTs and insurance and all these different categories, most of the respondents were not thrilled. They weren't saying they were on a 1 to 10 scale at an 8 or a 9. They were measuring themselves as 5 or 6s, kind of the middle of the pack. And that's a very depressing finding, because we're making a huge investment in technologies. We want them to be appreciated by the people who, especially those people in the, as you mentioned, the people in the trenches, they're doing all the work. But you want to make sure that when they ask the question, is this good? Is it working? What do you really think? You get some interesting responses. Sometimes it works in the opposite. They think, well, who is the guy asking the question? He must be an auditor. So we don't necessarily get the greatest response, but that's something that was, it's surprising that we don't have more very positive responses.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. I think there is certainly a healthy level of cynicism in our industry these days, but all the same, some positivity would be quite welcome. So I suppose we should wrap this up, though. So first and foremost, Pradeep and Larry, thank you so much for your time and for providing your insights into the survey and the results. And for the audience, thank all of you for joining Optiv for our LinkedIn Live for the full report. And if you're interested in learning more about cybersecurity consulting that fits your needs, please connect with us at optiv.com and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah.